Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Coffee and Co-op. I'm Nathanias, and it's 10 a.m. It's 10 a.m. Nice Wednesday morning. Gonna play some video games. We're currently working on our Kerrigan Prestige. Still level 5. I think we just unlocked lurkers, so we can try to use these bad boys to get ourselves into a slightly better position with regards to everything else that we have going on with our build and our setup. This is a fun one. Actually, lurkers should be pretty useful here, right? I don't mind this. I don't mind this one bit. I don't mind it one bit. I don't mind it whatsoever. I hope that you've all been having a nice start to your day. And give you guys some zombie alien bashing to bear witness to as we make our way through the middle of the week. Hope everybody's staying safe out there. Of course, been hearing lots about case numbers going up and all that jazz. So make sure you're taking care of yourselves. Even if you don't think it's a big deal, your family and friends might. And I think we all want our friends and family to be okay. But with that being said, minor evacuation is still a bit of a trickier one to do, right? Considering that there's still a decent amount of air units at play. Can Kerrigan on her own with a bunch of lurkers do it? Well, I need hydras to make lurkers, so I think that we should be okay. Or maybe our teammate's not going to load into this game. A level 90 Dahaka does sound pretty enticing, though, for a teammate. Oh, you can't see his thing because my thing blocks it. Well, that's fine. He's a level 90 Dahaka, and now you know. Instead of having to ask the question, what level is your teammate? And I think we're ready to go. Sometimes I ask myself if I need to start recording after we start the game, just in case, but I like to live a little bit on the dangerous side sometimes. You know what I mean? You know, you ever just wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm just going to have plain old toast with a little bit of butter on it. I don't really need to get fancy. In my opinion, that just means that you're really good at toasting your bread and you buy good bread. It doesn't mean you're basic. It just means your basics are perfected. It's actually one of the reasons why I really like just freshly baked bagels. I love a fresh, soft bagel. If you've ever had a truly fresh, soft bagel, you'll understand what I'm talking about. Because what makes a bagel really good is not what you put on it. It's the bagel. If the bagel is bad, you can put anything on it and you're going to be like, man, that bagel sucked, but at least I like garlic butter, right? That's why it's important to get that good stuff. So Dahaka has a clone, and if Dahaka or the clone dies, the other dies. So he's doing that. Oh, he's got Dahaka and Zwayhaka. He's got the two Hakas. Oh. Okay. Well, this should be pretty simple then, right? I mean, Dahaka mastery 90 with 2 Dahakas. That's double the smacking potential for the early game, right? Do they both get the same benefits? Doesn't seem like it. Now the essence count is different. Okay. That's going to be a fun one to eventually do. The Super Dahaka brothers. Minerals don't grow on trees. I'm like, I just want to keep spending my larva on drones. I'll build a queen when I have excess minerals, but I'm like, I'm going to get a hatch here. Want to have it a hatchery to help. Because I feel like it's always a little bit snowbally when you want to play the Zerg commanders. You got to make that big economic investment early on. But you can't really do that like you do in ladder. Mostly because you don't have a free expansion to take like you do on ladder. You know, when you play, you boot up the old 1v1 and you're like, yes, every single map gives you a free base. And they say co-op is easier. Look at this. We got to kill like multiple bunkers just to take a base. Can you imagine if regular 1v1 was like that and you had to kill like 3 infested bunkers in your natural before you could even do anything? You'd actually kind of hope that your opponent would be trying to cheese you almost, right? Because if your opponent tried to cheese you in that situation, then at the very least, they'd have to kill the infested bunkers to get to you, right? I don't know. A little food for thought there. How about that? Instead of putting a noob timer where you can't damage your opponent's units because you don't want people to get cheesed as much, you just got to put some camps in the camps outside of everybody's bases. There you go. Put a neutral siege tank on top of something. That's a great way to make sure that people aren't trying to fight in the beginning of the game. But that wouldn't be StarCraft now, would it? No, it would not. No, it would not. Well, we've got Kerrigan and 2 Dahakas, which should be a pretty good combination. Should be a pretty good combo. I mean, yeah, two Dahakas plus a Kerrigan. 2 Dahakas, 1 Kerrigan. You guys know what I mean? Have you seen that video? You probably don't want to, if I'm being honest with you. You shouldn't, I don't know if that exists, but if it does, don't watch it. You'll regret it. You'll most likely regret it a lot. Today on stream, I'm going to be playing the new season of League of Legends, actually, I think is starting. They make some changes to, a lot of item changes. I was reading the patch notes earlier, as well as a lot of changes in the department of, like, what's it called? See, I don't have my W hotkey because W is for patrol, so I don't get to use that ability of Kerrigan's. But lots of item changes, some jungle changes, which I actually really like. And they pretty much reworked how cooldown reduction and critical hits work in the game, because they were kind of tired of both of those things being big limiting factors for new items that they made, which, I mean, I agree was definitely an issue. So I'm excited to be trying that out a little bit later today on the Twitch stream. But also happy to be here making the co-op memes. I still want to max all these guys out. It's just, you know, it's going to take a little while. Should be able to save this base without too much trouble. Hell yeah. As for any coffee-related questions that may pop up while you're watching this broadcast today, or this YouTube video today, I have... Oh, goodness. I drank my tea already. It was the first thing I had when I woke up. There was a bunch of garbage I needed to take out. You know, I was just kind of doing some morning chores. I'm a very morning chores person. I don't know if any of you guys are like that, but I find that I'm most productive right when I wake up. Like, when I get out of bed, that's the time that I'm like, all right, let's take the trash out. Let's make sure that there's nothing here. You know, if there's any leftover trash from the evening before, right? Like, usually there's like a glass or two or some stuff that kind of just gets left behind around the apartment. And I find I'm most productive actually when I just wake up and I'm like, all right, it's time to take care of this. It's not something that I've ever really struggled with. Usually at night, I'm just like, hey, I try to get through everything during the day so that I can have a nice rest in the evening and just chill and play games or watch TV and stuff like that. So I try to get it all out of the way, and then I go to work, do my stream stuff, and then when I'm done streaming, I can just have a beer and be like, all right, there's maybe only a handful of things that need to be done around the apartment. I'm waking up at like 7 o'clock every single day. Actually, yesterday I got up pretty early. I was casting DreamHack, and unfortunately, I made the classic mistake of not realizing that the DreamHack, this is an embarrassing one for me to admit, but the DreamHack show that we had actually started an hour earlier yesterday. I missed the first match casting it. This is something that's pretty embarrassing for me, but I think talking about it is important for me to process it. At least for me. I don't really know if you guys care. If you don't care, it doesn't really matter. But that's part of my process. It's very important that I acknowledge it in a visible capacity for myself, so that I don't feel like I'm trying to hide my shame, I guess, if that makes any sense. I think it's very important to own your mistakes and whatnot, because that's then people, when people see that you try to own your mistakes, they're gonna hold you more accountable the next time that you do it. And I think when you do, I think if I screw up something, you know, professionally with something that's important like my job, then that's reason enough for me to want people to be a little bit, you know, more aware. Because I certainly don't want to hold myself to a standard where that kind of thing would happen. But yeah, it's actually the fact that we've been getting up so early for these DreamHack casts that has really made it like just a super normal thing for me now, that I'm always just chilling like that now. I'm just pretty much every single day, I'm just getting up at 7, taking the dog outside, making sure he goes to the bathroom. If he left a mess for me overnight, making sure to clean that up. All that important stuff, you know. Yeah, assimilation aura. Good stuff. All right, come on. And overseers are not cheap. I think the ship should make it just fine.
Speak. My search continues.
It's kind of funny doing this without the old Twitch chat here, though. All right, we did it, Patrick. We saved the city. There are no upgrades for the lurkers this early, right? No, of course not. So I'll try not to focus too much on the lurkers then because of that, because obviously that's one of those things that can snowball back the other way pretty fast for you.
Yes.
You know, and I certainly don't want to risk losing the game because I built a bunch of unupgradable lurkers. At least the Hydras have the range upgrade. Not necessarily ideal, but it is something. Simply cannot do that. So I'll spend all my excess minerals just kind of rebuilding the drones. Obviously, I'm not spreading any creep. I don't... The biggest benefit of this prestige is that you get double the effects of malignant creep. But malignant creep itself doesn't unlock until level 7. So once again, I find myself saying, yeah, guys, we're just kind of chilling, waiting for malignant creep to unlock. I'm glad I had some spine crawlers and spore crawlers here. That's nice.
Your queen, listen.
Hydras are not really worried about these units.
What?
Hell yeah. I saw a benchmark. I saw benchmarks for the new AMD processors that are coming out. All right, get this, get this. I have a Ryzen 3950X, which is the 16-core, 32-thread AMD CPU that they dropped at the end of last year, like November or whatever. And this computer processor is very good, right? I can do all my stream stuff. I play my games at 4K, even while I'm streaming. And things just kind of work fantastically. Things just kind of work fantastically with the setup that I've got rolling. Oh, these zombies that spawned underneath the Hydras are going to insta-kill them, I see. Okay. Well, it's time to turn you guys into beautiful lurker babies. So, I was looking at this, and they had for StarCraft 2, I think I saw a benchmark of, I think it might have been the 3600 versus the 5600. So this would be like the mid-range option, right? This would be the, I'm not spending, you know, close to $1,000 on my CPU option. They had a performance analysis because of the single core gains. Now, I'm about to blow your minds possibly with this, so prepare yourselves. Now, normally in StarCraft, your frame rate, when things get insane, can go down in like a 4v4 as low as 1 FPS, right? This is not an unusual thing. If you're hearing me say this and you're surprised by that, you probably don't actually play StarCraft. If you do play StarCraft, then you know that this game is something that chugs a lot when there's a tremendous amount of units on the field or something like that. There's the old camera freezing on me. So you know that. You know that StarCraft is an intensive single-threaded game to run. But the analysis was for the 3600 that they had their 1% low FPS was 1 FPS, which is sadly something that in big StarCraft games is quite normal. Nobody should be surprised to hear that. That's, you know, that is just StarCraft. But the average FPS for that late game was like, went from, you know, from maybe 100 at the start of the game. 100 FPS at the beginning of an SC2 game isn't really that hard when there's not a lot of units, right? Average, you're going to end up somewhere in a 4v4 like 30 FPS probably once everybody gets maxed out, you know, without those 1% lows. And that was reflected in the benchmark that these guys had, right? So all of this sounds cash money, right? Very kosher. Now, what happens next? So the 5600, which has all the new features or whatever of the biggest thing that they did was they unify the CCXs and the cache. If you're a nerd, you know what that means. If you don't, basically it's like they came out with a new engine for the car, right? And they're like, okay, so now StarCraft has like a tipping point with its tick rate and the AI and the pathing. If you can actually do all of the things for the units fast enough, you can get really high FPS. But you have to be able to do all of the things fast enough. All of the unit interactions in StarCraft, your computer is not just running the game for you, it's also running the game for your opponent, because that's how replays work, right? It doesn't record the game, it records the actions of all players, and the replay or your game just inputs the actions to those units so that you can have a perfect copy of the game, even though you only got to play, you know, half of it, for example, right? You were only one of two players. So on the 5600 test, they are 1% low. Went from, I think it was something like, I'm actually gonna pull this up. Because I thought that this was fascinating. I thought that this was absolutely fascinating. So their 1% lows that they reported on the 5600X. Now this was with a 2070 Super graphics card. All the guy did was swap the CPU out. So the entire system, other than that, was the same. So their minimum FPS in the 4v4 was 37. That was their 1% low. Was 37 FPS compared to, you know, that like 3 FPS of like pretty much any other normal computer in a late game 4v4. So they got 37 for their minimum. The game didn't drop below that. They ran the replay of the same 4v4 so that it was accurate, just in case anybody wants to know data-wise, like what were they doing. They played a full maxed out Mega Late Game 4v4 replay on once on the 3600, once on the other, once on the 5600. So they did it on both. Now, like I said, the average FPS, now I have the numbers in front of me, so these are going to be a little bit more accurate than what I said earlier. Sorry if you're mad that the numbers are changing a little bit now. But the average FPS on the 3600 was 43 FPS, right? And the highest FPS that it hit at the very beginning of the game was 188. These all kind of fall in line with expectations for team game FPS. Starts off high, goes down as everybody builds units. And the average FPS on the 5600 was 199. 10 FPS higher than the max of the other CPU. That was the average, right? Their 1% low was 37 FPS, which was over 10 times well over 10 times the 1% of the other one. So not only do they have 10 times better for the minimum FPS, but the CPU also had almost more than 4 times, right? 43 times 4 would not equal 199. So they had massive gains, massive gains across the board. And the maximum FPS reported, the guy even emphasizes, really, this was actually the max FPS. In the beginning of the game, his StarCraft 2 is at 674 frames per second, which is unheard of on any current computer processor that I'm aware of, even the best ones that Intel has. Obviously, you wouldn't hold that kind of FPS forever, but if you're somebody like me who, with my, I have a Ryzen 3950X, I get the same level of performance there, right? I mean, I'm in a late game co-op game right now. I've got about 25, 30-ish FPS. So based on the numbers that this has, I would be able, if I had like a 5950X CPU, I would be able in this exact scenario right now that we're seeing, instead of having now 40-ish as it ends, I would have like 120 easily. Theoretically, right? Assuming that this is actually, not just some crazy outlier result. But that to me was just absolutely fascinating, because it's like they're overcoming what makes StarCraft run bad in terms of single thread by building single thread performance with new CPUs that actually push you past like the tipping point of, it's like you're not just doing all the actions in time or barely in time, you're doing them so fast that you can actually get extra frames now, which is something that no CPU that I'm aware of has done, because people generally, even with high-end Intel's CPUs, you're still usually getting some rough numbers. So to me, that's super awesome. And there was another replay test as well, where the 3600 got a minimum of, this was the same replay. So the minimum in the second test was 11 FPS on the 3600, with an average FPS of 48 and a maximum FPS of 198. The 5600X had a minimum FPS of 55. This was a different 4v4 replay that both things went on the same path for. An average FPS of 183. So was that 5-6 times the amount of average frame rate, just off of literally going from a 3600 to 5600. There were no 4000 series AMD CPUs released for desktop. Those were only for certain laptop configurations, because it was a half step. Since it's still been 1 year, right? They basically had a mini second generation. So that's why there was no 4000. The 3600 to the 5600 would be like the direct next level, although not in cost. AMD, because their CPUs are performing better, raised their prices a lot. But the max FPS, the final stat there, from the 3600, 198 to the 5600, 754. Which means that it's just, because StarCraft is not a graphics intensive game, if you can meet the CPU demands of the game, you can basically get infinite FPS because it just doesn't really use graphics that much. Like with the 2070, the guy's hitting 700 or averaging 200 FPS in a 4v4 because it's all about making sure that the CPU and its cache are big and fast enough to just do all the pathing and AI actions for every single unit in the game. And if your computer's able to do that, you can get stupid good performance. So I go on this tangent because I actually find that to be pretty exciting. And that's something that makes me want to upgrade, because while obviously StarCraft is a game that benefits greatly from single thread, if all the individual single threads are better at the same rate, then it also stands to reason that any game that uses even multi-core but still CPU intense is going to see drastic gains from the CPU generation. And even though I had no interest in upgrading from my 3950X, if I can sell it for $400 or $500, I don't know, maybe, and get a 5950X in a month or two, I'm definitely going to want to do that, because apparently it makes StarCraft run smoother than butter. And there you go. There's your science nerd talk for your coffee and co-op today. We are about to unlock Malignant Creep, probably after the next episode. Yeah, we got the Hydra upgrades, though. We used a lot of Hydras, so I think the extra health will be nice with all those Baneling guys that blew mine up. And the Frenzy ability, just all of it. I'll take all of it. The Lurker upgrade sounds great, too. More range for my Lurkers. Thank you. Guys, like I said, hope you are all doing well and staying safe in these wild times. It's been a pleasure to be a part of the StarCraft community. And this is going to be the primary content outlet that I have for StarCraft from now on. So if you guys love this show, don't worry, we're not going anywhere. If this was the only StarCraft content of mine that you didn't like, I'm sorry. There's plenty of other great content creators that I'm sure are still producing lots of ladder content every day. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you guys. I'll see you next time.